Good morning, everyone. So today is going to be the last lecture in the lecture series in platform technologies. And in today's lecture, we are going to be looking into system administration. So we are going to discuss about some principles of system administration, some of the things necessary, sort of skills and all, and also some ethics and some other considerations relevant to system administration. And then one of the main things to remember is this, particularly when we are considering system administration, we will consider a variety of things, and then that will require a lot of skills as well. So given the nature of the delivery of this course, we are not going to do any practicals at the moment, but I have given some suggestions as to some relevant online lessons, online courses, and also I will share some more online resources as well that will help you get some familiarity with some of these things. And if in-person teaching starts again, we may try to organize some additional lessons to catch up on some lab activities. So then, to start with, we need to understand sort of what we mean by system administration, and sort of as a whole, we can call a system, or even the same thing would apply even when we are talking about platforms. We are talking about interconnected computer systems with networks and computers. So we are thinking about administrating such a system. So what we are thinking is making sure everything in that environment works as expected. Everything, all the functional requirements of those systems in that environment are happening as expected. And a person who does that would be called as the system administrator or sysadmin. And particularly in the era of cloud computing and online-based systems, some of these principles may significantly differ. For example, about 20 years ago, system administrators were largely confined to organizational environments. The computers were there, the hardware were there, so everything is in the premises. So then there was a lot of hands-on activities from a hardware point of view as well, and then all the configurations and all these things happening in that same environment. Whereas in the cloud computing environment, some of these things are now split apart. Some of these things may not be carried on by an organizational level administrator. Some of these things may be provided by a vendor. And as a system administrator or someone with those skills, you may go into these two different areas as well. You may go into use your skills in these two different areas as well. In today's lecture, we are going to just go through some of the basics of system administration. And towards the end, I will introduce some courses and some relevant skills that are good to have if this is something that you are interested in pursuing. So when we say a system administrator particularly, we are talking about a particular role or a particular job description, but the fact is this job description is going to change significantly from place to place. Say if you take a small company or a small organization that may not have many staff members, say 50 staff members at the most, then there may be only one person, one or two people managing everything related to IT in that environment. So they may manage the telephone system, computers, and all these things. They will manage, and they will deal with the users. They will be the tech support people, so they will do everything. Whereas in a large organization, in a large company, this may be significantly different. A system administrator may have particular tasks. They may manage a particular department or resources within a particular department, or they may manage only this type of computer systems. They may manage different types of computer systems. And then, as I said, in a cloud computing era, they may also have some additional sort of way of managing resources in such environments as well. So even though we may call a system administrator as a singular role, it is not as such, and it depends significantly on the context, significantly on the organization where that particular person may be working. And particularly of concern could be the size of the organization or the size of the sites, and that would be how many computers are there, what is the type of operating systems they are using, how many users are using those things. So in such situations, if it is a very small organization, sometimes even system administration may be outsourced to a third party organization. So there are some organizations that will do system administration as a service to other organizations, particularly small organizations. So then they may be outsourced like that. Whereas in sort of a mid-sized organization, we will have more users, more computers, and sometimes even more than one operating system in use. So now we need, say, more software systems are being used, so there will be need to managing those and all. There will be a bit more complex requirements. Then if we think about significantly larger organizations, there we are going to have even more complex requirements. We will have more and more users, again more range of software systems requiring more specialist skills among people who need to administer and manage these things. So that may also significantly expand the scope of work there. But one of the things that may happen in very large organizations is also sometimes they may outsource some of these things to other third-party organizations, particularly people providing IT support services and so on. It is commonplace for very large organizations to outsource these services. So when we think about organizational environment, and when we think about what are the things that are there in terms of the systems and devices and so on, we can identify a relationship between maturity and complexity. So when we say maturity, here we are talking about how long that system has been in place. Say for example, if we develop a software system and that has been in use for like say 5 years or so, then over time it would have been fixed all the problems and everybody is like familiar with using that. So you may not get a lot of issues with as the maturity increases. But at the same time, when the maturity increases, with other changes happening around the system, we may get other new problems happening. At the same time, if we think about the complexity of systems, again, if we have a very simple system, a simple software system, simple structure of the organization, again, it would be fairly easy to manage at that scale. But when the scale is bigger, when the complexity is more higher, again, we may get even more issues relevant to that. So between this maturity and complexity of systems in environments, we may get different types of problems. So in certain environments, users may be very familiar with systems and they may be able to manage things much better. In certain environments, the computer systems, everything is more complex, so users are not going to be able to manage them even if they are familiar with the systems. So those are some of the things that we may encounter when we think about what are the various types of organizations we may consider in the context of system administration. So then, when we think about system administration, we can think of a number of activities that are commonly done by system administrators. So these are things like adding and removing users, adding and removing new hardware devices, performing backups, installing software, troubleshooting when things go wrong in the environment, monitoring everything that is happening in the environment, then sometimes performing regular audits of security audits and such things to making sure things are done in a proper way over a long period of time. Then they may provide support, and they may have some role in terms of communicating with managers and end users, and sometimes even service providers, other vendors, and so on. So these are some common activities system administrators will do. But when we summarize these things, we can sort of summarize like the system administrators are most likely they are working with three main things. They will work with software, they will work with users, and then they will work with the hardware, the computers, machines. So those are the three things that they will be working with. So those are the three things they are mostly concerned about. Then in terms of all those things, they may do things relevant to creating things or creating a user account or something like that, reading or getting information. So these are like things like backups or reading things that are there in different things, updating software, updating systems, and so on, and deleting or removing again. All these type of activities can also apply to all the type of those three type of systems, so software, users, and machines. So we can sort of summarize those are the main things that system administrators would do in an organizational environment. Now we will briefly go through this list of activities, and we will look at one by one what some of the activities that can happen in those situations. So one of the first things that system administrators will be involved in is managing users. So if a new employee is coming into the organization, if the employee changes, then if the employee leaves. So throughout the life cycle of the employee, there may be some necessary involvement from the system administration point of view. So if a new employees come, then you have to figure out what is their level of employment, in what department they are in. Then they need to be given access to certain computer systems, certain software systems, and so on. Then if there are some internal changes in terms of employment, they may be given access to different systems, certain access may be removed, and those things also need to be happening. Then towards the end of the employment, again, all the access should be removed, the data should be erased or managed in a suitable manner. So again, at that point also, system administrators are going to be involved with user management. So that is one of the main things system administrators will do in most organizational environments. Then the second one they are going to be concerned about is hardware. So again, if there is new hardware systems to be installed, brought in, sometimes they may be involved in the process of purchasing these things. So if an employee wants a new hardware for a particular task, then they may have to make a request to the system administrators, and then they will figure out where to get these things, what are the specifications, and so on. So then they may be involved in those things. They may have to figure out what are the necessary hardware systems for the overall organization, then managing the common hardware systems, and particularly in the environment of even cloud computing and virtualization, again, they may be also responsible for managing that type of environments as well, not just physical servers, but also these cloud-based servers. The same system administrators will have to manage, because even when we are thinking about cloud-based servers, they are also in a way a virtual hardware platform, so they may be tasked with managing those as well. Then another thing that they will be required to do is keeping backups. So this would be backing up of user information, backing up of system data, databases, having redundancy with backups. Say if one computer fails, the information is there in another computer. Then if one computer fails, they should be able to restore that information back onto another computer, a replacement computer. So anything relevant to data and the longevity of the data and what happens to data over time, again, the system administration part will have to get involved in that. Then from a software point of view, again, installing software, updating new software versions, managing any issues with software versions. So there may be security patches that need to be updated. It could be operating system security patches or even application software security patches. So all these things, system administrators will have to keep track of. What are the devices already updated? What are the devices that needs to be updated? Any compatibility issues with hardware and software. So these are some of the things, again, system administration will take into consideration. Then troubleshooting would be another main thing and the main responsibility coming under system administration. So this is when issues are identified by users. For example, if a user may inform that their computer is not functioning as expected, or sometimes you may learn about these things from monitoring and like log files and monitoring systems and so on. So based on those, you will be able to identify issues and then find suitable solutions for those underlying causes. So again, that would be another responsibility of system administrators. And as I said, system monitoring would be also something done by system administrators, particularly in a large organizational environment. It would be very impractical and difficult to manage a large, a broader set of computer systems. So then they may have some other applications that can do this type of system monitoring. So they may utilize those monitoring systems to manage these things effectively. So producing logs from various systems and then maintaining alerts and answering to alerts, troubleshooting if problems arises. So these are also some things that system administrators will have to consider. Then like providing support to users, helping users, providing like if IT support, if there are necessary trainings required, providing those information, scheduling, like if there are downtimes to be scheduled, updates to be done, providing those information to those relevant users. Again, so this type of interpersonal communication activities will also be part of system administration. And then one last thing that system administrators will have to get involved with would be communicating everything that they are doing. So communicating to their managers, communicating to the end users, and even third-party vendors. So if there's a software system provider, communicating with them. If there's a hardware vendor, communicating with them and getting relevant information from those people. So that would be also a task of system administrators. So now let's look at some ethics behind system administration. So what we discussed previously is about what are the tasks that needs to be performed by a system administrator and some responsibilities and common activities. But now let's look at some ethics behind system administration, some of the things that we will have to consider when system administration is being carried out in an organizational environment. So the first thing to remember here is when we talk about ethics, it is mainly about what are the behaviors, what are the conducts that are normally accepted in an organization, in an environment. Particularly when we consider workplace, there will be certain things that are accepted and certain things that are not accepted. And computers, given they are also part of most work environments, and as system administrators, computers would be the things that we are interacting quite a lot, then there would be a certain expectation in terms of how we are interacting and behaving with those systems. So there will be certain expectation from the employers, the owners of the organization, the managers of the organization, that in terms of how people are going to use various computer systems. Then in many ways system administrators will be responsible for managing that as well. But at the same time, these computer systems may also have a lot of individual information, because different individuals may use different computer systems differently, and whatever the information that is there should not be accessed by someone else without proper permission. So anything that is not supposed to be seen by you should be considered as sensitive information. Even if you are a system administrator, the same rules would apply. So ethically, it is not right. Even if you can access this information, you should not access these things. And in most organizational environments, to manage these things, they may have certain access policies and so on to say who can do what in an organizational environment. So that is also something that needs to be considered significantly when we are talking about system administration. The reason why system administration is ethics is important in system administration is because system administrators in most cases have ability to access a lot of things. They can access other people's computers, they can reset passwords into systems. So they have a lot of capabilities in terms of doing a lot of these things. Then that also means they have access to things that are more sensitive and that are not normally accessed by normal employees of those organizations. So system administrators will sit in a different scale of access level compared to other people. So, and one of the main things is they will sit in what is called a position of trust. So people will trust system administrators because you have to trust them, because anyway they will be able to access these things. So that is why there will be a lot of checks when the system administrators are hired and so on. So that is also something to keep in mind, because you have access, you have the ability to access many things, then you should also consider how you do those things ethically, in an ethical manner. So in a way, as Spider-Man's uncle said, with great power comes great responsibility. So particularly as a system administration role, we should consider that as a service that is being provided to the end users. So the end users are the main part of the service that is being provided. So any sort of personal agenda of the system administrator should not be considered important. So we should not give way to such personal agendas or personal interests. So you say if there's a system administrator and they are interested in using a particular type of software, they should not force everyone in the organization to use that thing. They should consider about the end users as the important part there. Then, because it ultimately at the end of the day, what the end users want is what is the requirement the system administrators should provide. So then also they should not give way to any of their sort of personal views, or if they have personal agendas, personal interest, they should not consider those things, and they should directly address the concerns of their colleagues and customers with whom they are working with. One of the main things that we will talk about when we are talking about ethics, particularly in computer systems and use of computer systems, and this is something not particularly for system administration as well. So this is something applicable to any sort of systems, any computer system, even any software systems that you may develop, that is informed consent. If you are having users participating in a software system, in a computer system, and they are giving out some information, they are using the system in a certain manner, And then if you have the ability to learn about those things, if you have the ability to collect those information, then there should be a set understanding about what will happen to that information, and the users should have informed consent. That is, it's not just users are agreeing to whatever happening with the information. They should be informed about what are the possible things that can happen, and then they should consent, then they should agree to that usage. For example, if you are saying, in this application I am collecting this type of usage data and then I am going to sell that to a third party organization, then that should be particularly and specifically informed to the end users, and then they can make a determination whether they want to use it or not. Similarly, in an organization, particularly thinking from a system administration point of view, you should inform, say, if the system administrator can reset the password for someone's email and they can log into that email with the resetted password, then they should inform the users saying that there is this system administrator who will be able to access this email account. So then they can make sure that either they agree to use under that condition or don't agree to use under that condition, or at least they will know to be mindful in terms of what type of information they keep in that account. So these are some of the things that we should do with what is called informed consent. So we can have certain things like service level agreements between staff and users, and then there we can decide what is right, what is wrong, or what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. Then in any sort of organizational environment, there should be some form of usage policies. Again, these should be set out in consultation with system administration as to what type of users are acceptable and not acceptable, and that should be recorded in a policy, in a usage policy. So all the employees should be able to read and accept that in a formal manner. So then anything, any issues relevant to that can be handled properly. So things like, say, one of the common things that you would encounter in most organizational environments is you should not be able to use an organization resources for some personal use. So particularly if it is a personal business nature, for example, you cannot run a side business using one organization's computer, so, or even web servers and so on. The same rules would also apply to system administrators as well, particularly the fact that they have access to more things. They should be even more mindful in terms of what are the right usage policies, and everybody is following those things appropriately. And managing and monitoring those things would also come under the purview of system administrators. Then one of the other main things that we have to think about in most organization environments is what we call as privileged access. So then what we mean by that is that we sort of briefly touched upon when we are talking about security or like access level of information. So we can have different information, different systems, different servers being accessed or allowed access from different set of users. So then certain information can become privileged information, certain type of information, certain databases, certain files and so on. Then those privileged information should be used according to that access level, and managing that privilege levels appropriately, making sure people are not accessing them beyond the scope of access. For example, if it is a hospital system, you are the system administrator of a hospital, you may have access to certain hospital records, but accessing them and viewing another patient's access record should not be allowed to everyone in the environment. It should only be allowed to healthcare providers, like a doctor or a nurse may be able to check the reports, but should not be allowed for other personnel in the organization there. So then we'll have to have this type of privileged access levels, and then managing those privileged access levels. and particularly these type of certain access levels, accounts with privileged access should also be managed properly. Say if there's an account, again thinking the example of a hospital, if there's access account for a doctor, then that access to that account should also be protected in a much better way. Say they should have proper password protection, a good password protection, having changing the password in a suitable regularity and so on should also be done with that type of account. So again, depending on the nature of access, depending on the nature of user, depending on the nature of the user account, certain things have to be done differently, particularly when they have access to more privileged systems or information. And particularly relevant to this, we have to have certain policies informing users about what they can and cannot do with this information. For example, if you go into an organization and you are being given the role of a particular type of a user, then they should outline what are the things you can and cannot do. If you go as a system administrator into a bank, then they will have policies saying these are the things you are allowed to do and these are the things you are not allowed to do. So there should be policies outlining what are accepted for different users in terms of behaving with these systems. And then there should be procedures to managing these things without errors or having backups and all sorts of things like that. And then also particularly of interest would be what happens when somebody is like terminated from the organization, or if they leave the organization, then there should be certain actions taken to manage that. For example, if an employee is fired from the organization, their employment is forcefully terminated, then they may be angry about that and they may try to do something about that. So then their accounts and their accesses should be managed appropriately so that they cannot misuse their existing access to do some harm to that organization. Similarly, even if someone leaves willingly, voluntarily, they may still have access to these systems, and again, it's not appropriate for them to have those things. Again, those should be managed appropriately. Particularly, say if managers and such people are leaving, then you may even need to inform other organizations that are dealing with these users as well. One of the other things that we have to think about when we are thinking about computer systems and ethics is about what do we do about copyright, particularly with software, using software with licenses, not using any sort of illegal software and so on. Software piracy should not be allowed in organizational environments because that can have serious consequences even from a legal point of view, because if a large organization is known to be using a pirated software, the software vendor may make a criminal case against that, and that could lead to significant issues, and it could be a bad name for the organization as well. If you are a famous bank and you are using pirated copies of an office software, for example, that could be a bad name sort of publicly from a PR point of view. Also, it could be an issue. But also, one of the main issues with copyright and pirated software could be security issues, because most pirated software may come along with certain malware, certain other security problems, and then having them in larger computer system environments may lead to significant problems without our knowing. So then this is also something that should be managed properly. So only having approved software in work computers and knowing what are those approved softwares, who are the vendors with licenses, having proper security updates and so on. So that is also going to be one of the reasons why we would want to go to legal copyrighted software with licenses. Then another concern thinking from an ethical point of view would be various privacy expectations. So when we say privacy expectation, it is all about private information. So even when you are using an organization's computer resources, maybe of an office email, there may be certain expectation that your information, there will be some level of privacy may be expected. So for example, if you use the work email and send an email to another colleague talking about your manager, you may expect that that email is not going to be released to the manager. The manager should not be able to see that. That may be an expectation. But in certain organizational environments, the policies can specify that everything belongs to the employer. So the organization will have access to everything. But it has to be specified, because by normally a user expectation will be something in terms of privacy, but in reality that may be something different. So for example, if it is a financial organization and that financial organization expects emails and phone records and internal usage to be monitored, then the employees should be informed about that and they should give informed consent. So when they are joining the organization, in the agreements we should inform them that all your emails will be monitored like this, all your communication will be monitored like this, and then they are agreeing to that when they are joining the organization. And any policies relevant to privacy and monitoring, so anything like we will monitor these things, we will monitor in this way, and what we monitor, we will be recording those things for a period of time. So that should also be disclosed to the employees. So for example, even many organizations you may observe, like when you call a call center, for example, they may disclose to you saying this call may be recorded for monitoring and training purposes or something like that. So again, they are informing that they are doing such an action of recording your call, and then they should disclose so that people can be informed about that and agree to that. So that is why you should sometimes not record calls on your phones and then have serious problems in years. Again, there should be particular policies and practices governing those things. And particularly about privacy, one of the main things that will govern all these things would be privacy laws. Particularly these days, we have in many countries, there are many privacy laws dictating what companies should do, what online service providers should do in terms of private information, how they should manage these things. So there are certain laws specifying these things. And if there are certain laws in the country that you're operating in, then you have to adhere to those laws and regulations as well. So that would be also important. So you cannot just have organizational level policies and disregard the laws of the country. So if there are laws about that, then whatever activities that you are doing, maybe with privacy, may be related to privacy, even generally about anything in computing will have to be managed according to the accepted things under the law. And finally, one of the main things that we have to consider, particularly from a system administration point of view, is adhering to what is called unethical or illegal requests. Say, for example, you are the system administrator, you are an administrator who have access to a large amount of information in an organization. Then you have a friend in the organization or friend outside the organization who may come and ask you for some information from the system. They may ask for some information about their file, for example, or someone else's file, for example. Again, that may be something that you should not comply, because it is not something you are not supposed to do. So the best thing to do there would be resist. So saying like you cannot do that. And any such request you receive, you have to document them and think about what is the right and wrong actions in that environment and do it according to that. Even if they are coming from a higher authority, like even if your manager asks, you have to think if that is the right thing to do, and then you may even ask them to send the request in writing. Say, for example, if a manager comes and asks you, can you get that file for that employee, then if that is not something that you should not be giving, then you can tell them, send me an email asking for that. Then you can give, at least you have some evidence to say You only gave it to them because there is an official record of that. So you cannot go and make accusations saying like asking for that wrong, asking for that is wrong, and you are doing it for a wrong purpose. But you need to have proper evidence when you are doing action, particularly when you have this level of privileged access to systems. So there may be certain requests that you will have to consider under these issues as well, whether it is an ethical issue, whether it's an illegal issue. You have to think about those as well. And finally, you may also be needing to work with law enforcement of a country, for example. There may be certain issues in the organizational environment involving internal people or involving external people, and then there may be expectation for court cases, investigations. Then you may have to release some information to law enforcement. But one of the main things is you have to make sure that it is coming from the correct entities, correct people are requesting the information. So you have to verify that information from where the request is coming. But then also you have to be aware of social engineering attacks. So for example, somebody may call and say, I am the ASP crime branch, I need this information. Can you send that information to me? You have to make sure that it is actually that person actually has the right to request that information, whether there's a court order, whether there's an investigation going, and they may have to produce some official request. And say, for example, you should not send something to a personal Yahoo email account, for example. Maybe you can send that to an official account for that law enforcement authority, law enforcement entity. So you have to think about that as well. You have to verify the validity of the request and then keep in mind whether you are doing the right thing even in that context. So that is also something to remember. Again, not just from a system administration point of view, even when you are building other type of computer systems, when you are dealing with other type of computer systems, you have to think about that. So this is something that you will come across in other places as well. And one of the reasons why we are discussing ethics today is not just in the context of system administration, but overall in other contexts as well. In various other things that we discussed previously, there are also these type of ethical concerns will have to be addressed appropriately. So finally, let's look at some of the common skills that may be necessary for someone to be a system administrator, to do system administration. So one of the main things would be there should be procedures and policies followed. So just because you have the skill set to do this and this type of things in servers and computers will not be enough, because in an organization environment, you should do things according to policies, according to procedures. So you should be able to create and follow such policies. And then you have to manage time appropriately, give responsibility to others as well, say not taking everything to yourself. You may have some others doing some other tasks as well. And one of the main things is you are serving the customer, you are serving the end users. So you have to treat them as customers and help them. It is a service oriented role. So you will have to cater to their needs. And as I said, ethics will be a fundamental thing that would be necessary for this role. For any role in computing, again, we'll have to think about ethics there as well. So, and also, finally, from a technical point of view, you need to have better understanding of hardware systems, software systems, and sort of troubleshooting and problem solving and so on. So those would also be necessary. And particularly from a technical point of view, there may be some additional skills that may be necessary. You can improve these skills as you go along your education and career. So these are working with different operating systems, different hardware systems, networking, databases, security, storage systems, And one of the main things in the current scenario is also focusing on virtualization and cloud computing. So these are some of the areas of skilled areas that you will have to focus on when you are thinking about a career in this type of a work environment. So as I said, there are a number of courses that you can take online, and some of these courses you can even do them as certificate courses. And so from an employment point of view, regardless of system administration or not. So here I have listed some that is more relevant to system administration, but also generally about platform technologies and overall for this course as well, not just for this particular lecture. You can do some of these courses, and you can normally do them on your own pace. These are online based courses. You do some activities, you learn about various things, operating systems, different operating systems, databases, and so on. And having some of these certifications and skills will be very valuable when you finish your education and when you go into the job market. Having these skills will be much more valuable, because at the end of the day, you are going to do some subjects in the university, you are going to pass these subjects, but when you go out into the industry, when you go out into the job market, it will be mostly the skills that you can offer to an organization that will be interesting for them. So think from that perspective as well, and consider not just these courses, similar courses that is in the interest area that you are focusing on, and then you can do some of those. And particularly in the context of this course, and I have mentioned some relevant to system administration as well, you can consider those from a practical point of view. You can get some practical exposure as well. So that's all we have for today's lecture. Are there any questions? So it's not just from today's lecture, because today is the last lecture in the lecture series. So we'll conclude the series of lectures with today's one. So any questions or any thoughts from the previous lectures also, we can have a discussion after this. So we may conclude the lecture part with that today, and we may continue having a discussion after this. So thank you for joining in today's lecture, and hopefully I will meet you at a different module at a different time. So until that time, good luck with everything. See you. Bye.